Permaculture really starts with an ethic, earth care. That's care of the whole systems of earth and the species. So we actually devise model systems. Much of the design is drawn from nature. The end result that we aim for is to produce a system that's ecologically sound and economically profitable. It can get as sophisticated or as simple as you like. Hi, I'm Bill Mollison. I sometimes get very sick of bad news. And I think we should always look at things like that and try to turn it into good news. It's really easy to turn things around. In 5 weeks' time, this will be a nice set of potatoes. And for me, that's good news. In the late 60s, I was protesting social and environmental issues. But by the early 70s, I decided protest wasn't good enough. So I commenced designing gardens and positive design systems for human settlements. If people would only realise that everything they ever needed is right outside their door. All you really need is sun, plants, and keep your eye on the soil. And of course, if you've got plenty of fruit, you've got a lot of friends. This is my garden in the subtropics. From here to the equator, all the fertility is held in plants, not in the soil. Therefore, you have to make an extremely dense plant system, and the mulch and fertiliser we put on is all up in these plants. If we remove the plants, we have an infertile situation. In the tropics, plough agriculture is totally inappropriate for cropping. For a few years we can hold nutrient perhaps, but then it will go because it's torrential and hot rains. Even the silica leaves the soil. This causes more pollution in the streams, more rapid losses of nutrient, and it would be a very rare crop that we can grow in which we get the value of the minerals lost back in the crop. If you produce a system which doesn't destroy basic resources like soil and produces negligible pollution, then you have something that can go on forever and in which people can live for an indefinite period without destroying the earth. And that is the ultimate aim, and all our sustainable systems achieve that aim. In 1972, there was no word in the English language for sustainable agricultural systems. So I coined the word permaculture from permanent in agriculture. And this is where the designer turns into a recliner. You can rest in your garden. If you have it already well planted, you can pretend to be working in the garden and be invisible from the house. Now, only 2 years later, I am invisible from the house. And before, where there were biting ants by the thousands, there are now only worms. And in fact, I can recline here and be totally invisible from even 10 feet away. When you build a permaculture garden, nature doesn't contain such a garden. This situation here, although it has a configuration like a forest, is yet incredibly rich in functional plants, plants that have a good relationship to each other. It's also incredibly rich in yield, much higher than either any agricultural, monocultural situation or nature itself. So it's specifically built to serve the needs of human households and communities. With most of the garden perennial or self-seeding, your work in planting is almost finished after a year or so, and basically you're a forager, you become a forager. There's always a large variety of food because a tremendous amount of tropical food is root crop for storage. Still, at most times of year, there's something good to eat. These gardens that we build in the tropics have very much a disorder of nature. This year I've been travelling, I don't have a lot of annual gardening. Okra. There's capsicum, bush basil, or basil. And you have a fairly good base for salads and main foods. There's probably about another 30 varieties that we could pick. I think there's 412 food plants just in this area here. If I look around, there's all the fuels and food that I could ever need. Fibres, mulch to do the garden, to extend the garden. All are here. It took me 30 working days over 3 years to achieve this. Once you've set up your own home, so you could leave it for 2 or 3 months and it just gets better, so that you're free to travel, then you can go and teach other people. And that's why we go to places like India and Africa, because a casual tourist look at those places will show that the houses there are not surrounded by all their needs. They're surrounded by croplands and they're surrounded by wastelands. Our first course in Southern Africa was given in 1987, and 2 students came home and set up a magnificent training centre in Zimbabwe, the Fambidzani Centre, which contains most of the examples that Africa needs.
Whose is this one now?
Whichever culture you're working with, you have a cultural method of work and a cultural method of learning. In Africa, everyone sings. They sing the work, they sing the learning, they sing the story from village to village. And to me, the sound of people singing while they work is Africa. We won't find that in Europe. Many Zimbabweans are poor farmers, so everything new we introduce has to be able to be made on the farm. But this heap went really quickly, Joseph. What are we doing? What are you doing?
Yeah, I'm just making these holes up to the ground so that when the air, because on the bottom we put some branches,
yes,
so that the air can circulate
through the heap.
Through the heap.
Yeah, when it heats up. You chaps work fast when you're singing.
Yes, yes.
It seemed no time at all.
Yeah,
very good.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Great.
We'll enjoy it when singing and making the combos at the same time.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not yours.
Yeah.
So this is like concrete.
Yeah, just like concrete.
And you moved in this half.
Yeah.
I find the students here are excellent and will make very good teachers. 9 months ago, John Ndira, who was with me, is one of those teachers. He's very fluent, and I find he knows at least as much as I do about this sort of system.
This partly is a guild where everything work together. And this winged bean releases nitrogen in the soil, and the banana dealer collects nutrients, nitrogen from the soil released by winged bean. Then we plant pawpaw so that it can be a stake for these creepers. And we are also trying to maintain a house for frogs, lizards underneath so that they can pick the pests which come and eat some of the flowers and the vegetable we have around. Everything in the system or everything in the ecosystem do help one another in another way or in another round.
Yes, I'd like to say that this particular guild I've never seen. And permaculture is not about which species firmly, but that you have a legume, a plant that uses a legume, a plant that repels pests. So we will see hundreds of different guilds made by students. And they will find out which ones are very successful for them. And then that can become more of a standard, and they can teach that one as a success. And what we try and do is make a lot of mistakes, because that tells us which ones are good ones to use. So you can never have a typical permaculture. Every one you visit will be very different. So what we're teaching is not how to do it, but how to think about doing it. The centre has to be appropriate to small farmers everywhere. One of the good ideas, which although efficient, is made of local materials and can be made by people who are not real craftsmen. An extremely cheap beehive.
This is a toba beehive. These are widely used in Africa anyways. Very easy to handle.
Yeah.
And
cheap.
Cheap to make.
Anyone can make them?
Anybody can make them. You can see it's just an ordinary box. So your honeycombs don't stick to the sides of the hive. See, so when you are cropping, you don't have a problem. All you need to do is just lift the bar up and you lift it clean with the comb, with that shape of the box there.
This is the starter.
Yeah, this is to start them off. You see, it's a bit of wax, which we use. We've got Mkwanda here, who is expert. So it's quite simple, indeed, to work with.
But these are African bees. These are killer bees, aren't they?
No, African bees are very lovely to work with. we are not dead. We are working with the bees, Bill.
The Americans would tell these killer bees. They're doing everything to stop them.
Very light.
One of the very exciting things that has happened in Zimbabwe is that students from Fambizanai were invited to a local school to teach permaculture design. The children at St. Vincent's come from the farms and villages of this district. Many of their parents are farmers.
That was January, yeah.
You can see the whole thing improved since. They and the teachers and the headmaster Mac, who is very enthusiastic, brought in seedlings and seed from their own gardens.
Really starting to go with the rains.
Yeah, right.
The beginning of the rains, just nothing.
Yeah. How quickly did they get learning?
About 2 minutes. We started here.
Yeah.
And we went really...
It's not just an exercise for the kids. In 2 years, the garden will be producing all their lunches. The students worked out their site design and began by putting in hundreds of meters of water harvesting ditches on contour.
We dug a pit, so that most of the water can collect in there, and we put mulch in there. And these trees help to support the tree, which will then grow. Some are nitrogen fixers.
Did you design this idea, or?
Yeah.
I make the same thing in my home. That's why I recognize it. I think they all come to the same conclusion.
Yeah.
You throw your old school books in here, waste paper. In Africa, we see most people as fairly healthy, with access to a pretty good education. But in densely populated India, we don't have that level of resources. The problem with the world may not be what it appears to be, just too many people. It may be that all investment goes to further consumption and expansion of the cities without any expansion of the resources, trees, forests, clean water and air that people need. Unless we stop, we'll hit an absolute shortage of water, absolute shortage of air quality, absolute shortage of soil. The cities of India are at breaking point because they're being flooded with rural refugees. The resources could have been directed to strengthening traditional methods and the great variety in traditional crops, which fed everybody in India. But instead of that, resources have been directed to a green revolution type of export agriculture, which has actually taken away from real food for all of India. We're in India in the southern Deccan, about 2 hours by road north of Hyderabad. This whole area is covered with flat, barren rock that's been eroded over the years. And it was here that we gave the first permaculture course in India. And this place, which is the Deccan Development Society's headquarters, is where we started to spread permaculture in India. And one of my students was Dr. Venkat. Hello, Venkat. So, this is the first banana clump I planted here. And it was all hard like this in those days. I remember the students helping me. We had to use picks here. I've always been amazed at the good bunches from this plant. How much have we got off it?
About 80 to 90 bunches.
In how many years?
1.5 years.
That's pretty good, isn't it?
Very good.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of bananas off it. This was the first banana circle, I think, on the Deccan.
In India.
In India.
In India.
Yeah.
First circle.
Yeah, it stood up very well.
Yeah.
But what I'd really like to do is have a look at the system you put in, because this is all we did in the first place.
That's right.
And nothing in here be older than what?
2.5 years.
2.5
Nothing,
years.
nothing that you see here is more than 2.5 years old. And another interesting part about what you are seeing in this particular area is that a foot below this is a bedrock of laterite. Towards the end of December 1987, this is how our farm looked like. No trees, not even shrubs, not even grass.
I remember that all right. I remember using the picks, you know, you couldn't just plant
We
something.
couldn't just plant at that time.
This is astounding, you know, jackfruit.
Pomegranate here,
Pomegranate,
here,
guava, there's
a cherry
cherry,
there, a mango.
mango. God, the place is dripping with fruit here. Banana.